Mahomes at bay.
The Tampa Bay Bucks, Super Bowl 55.
Hello and welcome to the Bucks Banter podcast. As always, I am your host, Collin and I'm happy to be here. Well, the 2021 NFL Draft has now come and gone, which means it is time for me to summarize the entire draft and talk about a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to start off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers picks. I'm going to move into my favorite players selected in terms of where they were selected, biggest steals, pretty much, the guys I like. And then I'm going to move into a section where I am going to coin the 10 best drafts, meaning which teams did the best for themselves, which teams helped their cause the most from where they were heading into the draft to now where they'll be heading into the season. Obviously, that neglects any free agency acquisitions or anything to happen between now or the beginning of the NFL season in September. So let's get going. I want to start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Round 1, 32nd overall, Joe Tryon, edge rusher out of Washington. We've talked about Joe Tryon a whole bunch on previous episodes. Obviously, a very physically gifted edge rusher coming off of an opt-out, so he didn't play this past season. Jason Light talked a lot about his mental makeup, how well he did in their Zoom interviews, and just how well-suited this player is to fit what it is they're looking to add, which is someone who can be effective in a situational pass-rushing presence for this first season, and the ability to grow into much more with a nice high ceiling as an individual player. So I don't want to talk too much about Joe Tryon. I got a whole bunch of guys I want to touch on. Okay, with the second pick in the second round, 64 overall, Kyle Trask, quarterback out of the University of Florida. Someone many Bucs fans are extremely familiar with. This is a contentious pick amongst the Buccaneers faithful. And I'm not going to lie, I was disappointed with the selection, if I'm being completely honest. If they had to go quarterback there, I would have much preferred Davis Mills out of Stanford. With that being said, I will accept it and cheer for Kyle Trask with everything I got, and I hope that he can develop into much more than just a serviceable backup. But yeah, I just think with that pick, 64th overall, that's a good pick. The Bucs they were in such a cool position this year, having returned all their starters for next year. They're already ready to go. They're locked and loaded. So I felt like taking your shots on some extremely high ceiling players would be the way to go. That's at least the way that I would have done it. I would say they did that in the first round with Joe Tryon, so no qualms from me in regards to that selection. Kyle Trask, I don't know what his ceiling is, but there's a plethora of physical limitations, one might say, that I think really limit his ceiling as an NFL player. He's a little bit of a one-hit wonder, very inexperienced, and his physical traits, his arm strength, his mobility, his ability to improvise on the field and make plays happen when nothing's going on. These are all things that would be considered weaknesses of his. So ultimately, he's the opposite of the type of player I would have liked to take there. Whereas a quarterback like Davis Mills out of Stanford, he's also unproven at the collegiate level, but number one prospect coming out of high school, tons of talent, incredible arm. That's just my personal preference. Don't like the Kyle Trask pick, but hopefully he works out and I can eat my words, because that would be preferred by me. In the third round, the Jason Light selected with the 95th overall selection, Robert Hainsey, who was right tackle at Notre Dame, 6'5", 300 pounds. It's a multi-year team captain, something you like to see for an offensive tackle. Firstly, coming out of Notre Dame, that's great. It seems to be a real factory for O-linemen. Add in the physical size, that's also great. But the funny thing about this player is, even though he started his last couple seasons as a right tackle, he projects to move under the inside in the NFL. And Jason Light has said as much as well. They see him being a versatile guy capable of playing center or guard at the NFL level. So he kind of replaces Joe Haeg as that like swing interior offensive lineman for them, which is valuable. And we've got Aaron Stinney as well. So I'm feeling really good about shoring up some depth along the offensive line. I don't know a ton about Robert Hainsey. He's not a guy who came across my film study prior to the draft. But hopefully he can prove to be a serviceable addition to the team. And the one thing I will say, I've talked before, I've mentioned on Twitter, guy I like to give credit to when credit's due. Brandon Thorne is the certified offensive line expert, my favorite go-to guy when I want to know. So as soon as I saw Robert Hainsey was our pick, I just had to scour Brandon Thorne's material and see, is this a guy that he endorses, or is it someone he wasn't too high on? And he's a big fan of Robert Hainsey. He does find him better suited for a zone rushing scheme, which is not the Buccaneers' forte. So he was a little bit surprised by the fit. He thought maybe he could have been a little more valuable in a different scheme where they do run that zone rushing scheme. But, as opposed to the Buccaneers' vertical passing attack. But he had him as his 10th ranked interior offensive lineman overall. He described him as a technician and said he has pristine technique, fundamentals, and efficiency. I'm good with this pick. So far, according to my own assessment, the Buccaneers are 2 out of 3 in picks I'm happy with. Now, my favorite pick of the draft for the Buccaneers occurred in round 4 with the 129th overall selection. They took small, undersized receiver Jalen Darden out of North Texas, wide receiver. And this guy, if you don't know anything about Jalen Darden, you need to. And I didn't know much about Jalen Darden before the draft, but I've studied up on him, and I'm really jacked up. The more I watch, the more excited I get. He's a really shifty player, incredibly elusive, super exciting, just an ankle breaker. So check his highlights out. Trust me, I implore you to do that. Versatile athlete in general. He was an all-district quarterback in high school. Started out as a backup receiver for the Mean Green of North Texas, and he was their like primary return guy as a freshman. And then I think he was just too good. He was just too effective to keep off the field. And last season, he was second in the nation in receiving touchdowns with 19. He had 31 receiving touchdowns over his last 21 games played at the college level. Just mind-blowing production. I mean, you gotta take it with a grain of salt. He's with the competition he's playing, coming out of North Texas. But what more is the guy supposed to do? He did everything he could and then some. He was third in the nation in receiving yards per game, averaging 132 yards. He averaged over 8 receptions a game. So he was also the Conference USA Most Valuable Player, obviously then a first-team all-conference receiver. So he has been drafted to be our next kick returner, I think, right away. He's going to replace Jaden Mickens, who is, it's worth mentioning, I thought did a really great job in our postseason run. I mean, go back, watch the tape of that Super Bowl. He's given us great field position every time. With that being said, though, he does not have the potential or explosive potential of someone like Jalen Darden. And I'm really excited to watch this kid. He's small, so it's kind of a different look. Like Scotty Miller's small, but he's still more of a vertical threat. Like he's a straight line, fast guy. Jalen Darden is fast in a straight line, and he's fast in all sorts of misdirection stuff. So really excited about Jalen Darden. Love the pick. And that really, those first 4 rounds, that's anyone you could expect to contribute positionally. I think the rest of our picks were all focused on acquiring special teams players, guys who can come in and contribute right away on special teams, which is something that has been emphasized. Bruce Arians loves talking about specials, and it was clear that the Bucs draft agenda was heavily invested in addressing their special teams. We lost Ryan Smith, who was just an ace, special teams ace all around. Love Ryan Smith. I believe he's with the Titans now. And he's going to try and play some corner, I imagine. That's probably what enticed him to leave. And then we lost a couple other guys who were valuable in specials. So in the 5th round, 176 selection, we took KJ Britt, who's a linebacker out of Auburn. And he's just like a throwback linebacker, like an aggressive, hard-hitting dude. He's 6 foot, 235, but just an absolute thumper. Like he's no Levante David. He's not fast. He's horrible in coverage, but he is a special team stud. He just crushes dudes. And he played really well at the Senior Bowl, which has become a bit of a theme. I know Jason Light loves good Senior Bowl performers. I believe that Hainsey, was also was one of the guys who really excelled at the Senior Bowl when he kicked in, played a bunch of center there. So yeah, KJ Britt, hard hitter. He had in 13 games in his 1 full year as a starter in 2019. He had 69 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, graded as one of the best run defenders in the country. And this dude is jacked up. So not only does he jack people up, he himself is jacked up. So, I mean, that doesn't really stand for shit, but he hits guys hard. He's a throwback. So hopefully he crushes it on special teams and becomes a valuable asset in that area. Skipping ahead to the 7th round, I forgot to mention that we actually moved up in the 4th to take Jalen Darden. As a result, we sacrificed our 6th round selection as well as our own 4th rounder. So we didn't have a pick in the 6th round. In the 7th, again, it was obvious. Everyone knew it at this point. We're just focused on special teams. So Chris Wilcox is a cornerback out of BYU. Stupid fast. He ran a 4.3 40. Not great reviews on his performance as a cornerback for BYU. But, I mean, we picked him 251st. This is the 7th round we're talking about, the last round of the draft. So I'm all but certain he was drafted to be a gunner on special teams. So hopefully he can put that speed to good use. He is apparently an effective tackler. So you can imagine great speed and being a good tackler. Those two attributes should lend kindly to an effective career as a special teamer. Let's hope. He's got to make the team first, right? And that same requirement, having to make the team, will apply to Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the 2021 NFL draft. That's right, he was a Buccaneer. Grant Stewart, who was listed as a linebacker, but kind of a hybrid, played a lot of safety at Houston. He was a Houston Cougar. A lot of people who followed that team considered him to be their best defensive player last year anyway. Super high energy, like no quit guy. And I don't know this from watching. This is just from the research, and I've been pouring over every bit of information and tape that I can on these guys. So I can't say I've sat and watched all the Houston Cougars games last year, right? But yeah, he's a really good tackler. He's tough as nails, and he has quite the backstory in terms of his life, and he's had a really tough upbringing. And I know Jason Light is a sucker for that. He loves a good Cinderella story. So Grant Stewart was a phenomenal special teams performer. That was an area he excelled at throughout his career at Houston. He was just so good there. He was also a defensive force for them. So our last 3 picks are all special teamers as far as I'm concerned. That's all you got to look at them as, which is fine. In evaluating our draft as a whole, if I had to grade it out, I would give it a C. And I'm sorry, but I'm just giving you my honest opinion here. I'm not playing. If you're a Bucs fan and you're like, what the hell, man? Well, I'm sorry. That's how I feel. I think this was a chance for us to really go for high potential guys, like take some swings, take some shots. We did that with Jalen Darden. I'm fine with the Tryon pick because he has a high ceiling. And I'm also fine with the Hainsey pick. It's just that Kyle Trask one really put a wrench in applying that philosophy that I would have preferred, taking him at 64th as the 6th quarterback off the board after those top 5. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. So I want to zip through, or attempt to zip through. I got a ton of notes here. I want to talk about my favorite picks of the draft. So I'm going to go round by round. Which players were my favorite picks based on the value, or maybe the fit or the need for the team, whatever the logic is. For whatever reason, they were my favorite player, or some of my favorite picks in that particular round. So in the first round, Justin Fields at 11. The Bears gave up a future first and fourth in next year's draft to swap spots with the Giants to move from 20 up to 11 to take Fields. He is my favorite quarterback in the draft, probably my favorite player in the draft. And, I've spent a good amount of time criticizing the Chicago Bears and how they've been unable to accumulate they've actually acquired a pretty decent collection of players, especially on the defensive side, but just unable to put them in positions to succeed. And I think Matt Nagy's on his last legs there. So we'll see if Justin Fields can take them somewhere they haven't been in a while. And they need to show that they can run an effective offense, especially when you consider that's what Nagy was brought there for, right? That's what he's known for. So let's see if, unlike Mitchell Trubisky, Matt Nagy can customize the offense to fit Justin Fields. Luckily for Nagy, Fields is so versatile and such a great passer and runner. I just can't see him not being successful as long as they put him in a position to succeed. And then, funny enough, the team that they traded with, the Giants, incorrect. That's the next pick I want to get to. But actually, let's just talk about it now. The team they switched with, the Giants, at 20, took Kadarius Toney, one of my favorite players, also receiver out of the University of Florida. I think he's a big reason why Kyle Trask put up such impressive numbers. I think when you're throwing a Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts, it's going to be a lot easier to be successful. Not to say Trask wasn't great in his last year at Florida. He was, but Kadarius Toney is legit. I've talked a ton about him. I've written a lot about him, so no need to dive in there any further. The Tennessee Titans at 22, they got Caleb Farley. And I've also talked about Caleb Farley. He had all these injury concerns coming out of Virginia Tech. He's had 2 back surgeries. He opted out of his last year, which is fine. I mean, I have no criticism of someone doing that. Shit, I probably would have too with how the world was. But Farley has incredible physical attributes, like a top 10 talent in the entire draft. They got him at 22. I love that. Like, that's a swing. They're taking a swing there. And if he pops, then that is just an incredible addition to the Titans team at a position of need. And lastly, Greg Newsome, another cornerback like Caleb Farley. The Browns got him at 26. I think that's phenomenal value. I had a feeling that Newsome might shoot up boards as the draft was approaching, and I could have seen him going before we even got to pick 20. However, he was around at 26. Cleveland Browns took advantage, and they have a tremendous secondary, and they're just continue to add pieces all over the place. Anyway, that sums up my 4 favorite picks from the first round. In the second round, and I'm going to try and go through these a little bit quicker as I go, but I also want to make sure that I am properly articulating and providing some valuable information on these guys, because if I just say their names, that's not all that useful for any listeners or viewers. So in the second round, 52nd overall, the Browns again struck gold in my opinion with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, JOK. You've heard his name a lot if you follow the Bucks Banter podcast. He has like Levante David type potential. Okay, Bucks fans, that's what I see. Maybe I don't think he's going to be Levante David, but he has that kind of game. This new age linebacker. And Levante David went 58th overall. Koramoah 52nd. Of course, Levante David was in the 2012 draft to your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Another guy who slipped, and I don't understand why. Well, I guess I do. I guess there were some knee issues that potentially rose some red flags for teams in the medicals. In fact, it must have been a bunch of teams because he was still around at 50. He was a guy I was just begging for the Bucks to take with their first round pick. But yeah, Azeez Ojulari, defensive end, edge rusher, out of Georgia. He's awesome. So he went to the Giants, and I think that's a huge scoop for them. So there you go. They already took Kadarius Toney, and here they take Azeez Ojulari. He's got to make you think they're going to make my top 10 drafts if I love their first 2 picks so much. At 47th, the 47th overall pick in the second round, Asante Samuel Jr. to the Chargers. Love that. I wrote about him a lot as a consideration for the Bucs at 32. Obviously, that didn't happen. I expected him to come off the board real early in the second round. He stuck around for 15 picks, so that's surprising to me. I think that's phenomenal value. Again, a great 1-2 for the LA Chargers, similar to the New York Giants, because they got Rashawn Slater in the first round at 13. Tremendous value on those guys. I also talked about the fact that I was surprised to see safety at a TCU, Trevon Moehrig, slide to 43. And I also talked about how Mike Mayock kind of redeemed himself from that Alex Leatherwood reach at 17 in the first round. Trevon Moehrig, great value, good player, tough as nails. I think there was a back injury that happened deadlifting or something leading up to the draft pretty recently, and I think some MRIs or scans revealed something that maybe spooked some teams, but that's just a report I read. Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma State. He went 39th to the Bears. That's another team who this is a second player that I've mentioned already for them. A little foreshadowing for you. I've talked about Tevin Jenkins in my first round review, so I don't want to do that too much. Great pick there. And the Cardinals at 49, taking Rondale Moore out of Purdue. This guy is wicked. He is real small, 5'7", 180, kind of in a similar mold in terms of his height anyway, to Jalen Darden, who the Bucs took in the fourth. Rondale Moore's an athletic freak, and calling him that is probably not even doing the term justice. Let me read you what he did at his pro day. He ran the 40-yard dash in 4.29. He's sub 4.3. Just unfathomable speed. And he jumped 45 and a half inches off the ground with his 2 feet after bending his knees. He was 45 and a half inches off the ground. That's legit too. This isn't like Earl Manigault on the blacktop at Rucker Park picking bills off the backboard where you kind of have to trust the validity of it, how much of it is exaggerated. This is official. 45 and a half inch vertical. God damn, that is stupid. So stupid, in fact, it is higher than Zion Williamson and LeBron James. So just a little cross sports reference for you. And so Cards, I mean, their offense, they're continuing to add nice pieces around Kyler Murray. So they got DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and Rondale Moore. It's going to really allow Cliff Kingsbury to get tricky on offense. So this is a big year for him, calling the plays there as a head coach with Kyler, who I love. I love Kyler Murray. I'm expecting big things from that offense this season. And staying in the second round, the last player I want to profile here, who was one of my favorite picks of the round, came second last pick in the round, 1 pick before we took Kyle Trask at a position we could have used, which is center or interior offensive lineman, and that's Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma. I think he could end up one day maybe being like one of the top centers in the sport. Similar outlook to Landon Dickerson out of Alabama. I think that's great value. And the Chiefs there are addressing a major need. So they really shored up their offensive line this draft, which is huge. And I think there's a good chance we see a Super Bowl rematch. Not necessarily, but it's a good chance of it for sure, because the Chiefs have really, really reinforced the trenches on the offensive side of the ball. Okay, on to the third round. My favorite players in the third round. How are we doing for time here? Okay, not too bad. Third round, offensive tackle Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan. The Falcons took him at 68. I saw him going in the first, according to a lot of draft experts. So you're getting him in the third round at 68. Bingo, bango. That's good value. At 77, Josh Palmer out of Tennessee, wide receiver. Canadian boy, good old boy out of Brampton, highly productive at Tennessee, playing against the best DBs in the nation, and he was very effective. So really excited to see him play with the Chargers with the weapons they have. Justin Herbert throwing him the ball. I think he could fit in really nicely there and be a bit of a sleeper. So third round, that's good. That's good stuff. Trey Sermon, running back out of Ohio State. He went 88th overall to the Niners. This guy is a top 5 back in the draft, most commonly considered. And let me just take you through his last 3 games. So he actually went down on the second series of the national title game, and it just broke my heart because he had looked incredible going into that game, and that was a huge loss for Ohio State early. Fields was already playing banged up, so once Trey Sermon went out, I think he broke his collarbone or popped his shoulder out. You just knew, taking away that dynamic of a weapon from their offense, they were in big trouble playing against big, bad, mighty Bama. But anyway, in his last 3 college games, he ran for almost 650 yards and 4 total touchdowns. That is some serious production from Trey Sermon. So, and then, he's going to a team like the 49ers with all these offensive pieces in place. Has a real nice depth piece to get there, and to get him in the 3rd round, I like it. Staying at the Ohio State University, with the 105th pick, the Denver Broncos took linebacker Baron Browning. He's just a tough, really good player, and I think it's good value. I think he's going to be a 10-year or beyond NFL starter at the linebacker position. Playing with the Broncos, he's going to be going behind that vicious front 4 with Bradley Chubb and Von Miller coming off an injury. Vic Fangio is going to be a great coach for him because that's his specialty, Fangio, and that Broncos defense is looking real fierce. And lastly, the Packers, they took Amari Rodgers out of Clemson. He's like a slot receiver, great hands, beautiful routes. He was like their veteran receiver, important presence on that team. Now the question, so Amari Rodgers, the question is, will the other A Rodgers still be there to get him the ball? Because obviously with everything coming out about Aaron Rodgers demanding a trade, he wants out. That's going to directly affect how valuable of a selection Amari Rodgers becomes. If Jordan Love's throwing him the ball, and I know that for a fact, I'm probably not even going to bother including his name. But in this case, I have to assume that Aaron Rodgers will be there because he is currently the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, and until I hear otherwise, I think it's a great pairing. I think Rodgers will make Aaron Rodgers will make Amari Rodgers a very effective rookie right away, and I think he's a nice complement to Martavius Valdez-Scantling, and of course Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. He would just fit really nicely in that offense, and yeah. Okay, that sums up the 3rd round. In the 4th round, my favorite picks of the 4th round. At 107, the New York Jets took Michael Carter, and he was the they had a 2-headed monster, the Tar Heels did, at the running back position. Javonte Williams, one of the top running backs in the draft. He was kind of the bell cow stud, but Michael Carter was incredibly efficient and effective as a part of that timeshare between those two. And he was kind of like their pass catcher, secondary running back, but he's a 4th rated running back by Thor Nystrom, who is one of the talent evaluators I respect most. He does an incredibly thorough job. Looks like he's working for Yahoo currently. He used to be with RotoWorld. But he compares Michael Carter to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and he says worst case he'll be Giovanni Bernard. So that's some serious claims being made by Thor. He's, as I said, an exceptional receiver. I think I said that. If not, I just did. And a really effective runner. I think he's really tailor-made for the NFL, and he's going to be a nice fit for the Jets. Okay, and Derek Barnes, linebacker out of Purdue. The Lions took him. Lions really addressed the core, the front 7 of the defense. They got Penei Sewell in the 1st. And I think Derek Barnes is legit at Purdue. I would have loved for the Bucs to scoop him up, but I wasn't dying for a linebacker. We certainly don't need one right now, but talent-wise, in their, with their 3rd round selection, I was certainly interested in Derek Barnes, and I tweeted out as much. Another player in the fourth. Unfortunately, he's going to be in the NFC South playing for the Panthers, backing up, playing alongside Christian McCaffrey. Chuba Hubbard out of Oklahoma State. Now, super interesting. Chuba Hubbard, I think, unlike Najee Harris, who really helped his cause and only improved his draft stock deciding to go back to school, Etienne didn't hurt his stock going back to school. Chuba Hubbard did. He dealt with injuries all year, coming off like a Heisman caliber junior season. So anyway, he hails from Edmonton, Alberta, which is rare enough on its own. But then when you dig into his background, or if you know anything about Chuba, he played high school football in Alberta. It's not like he went to some prep school down south. He played high school football in Alberta and ended up going to Oklahoma State to be their starting running back. Pretty incredible. So yeah, he's from Sherwood Park, Alberta. In his 3 years there in high school, he had 7,000 yards and 82 touchdowns. Not like that's relevant to any other form of competition, but his skill sure as hell translated. He's like a track star, right? He's a burner. I think for his senior year, he maybe put on a bit too much bulk, and it kind of slowed him down a little bit. But I think he's getting slept on. And I think in the fourth round, I think he's a lovely addition to the Panthers backfield, and he'll complement McCaffrey quite nicely. And from an individual perspective, like if McCaffrey goes down, which is certainly, it's likely he misses some games based on his track record with injuries. Chuba Hubbard could be even like a deep fantasy sleeper maybe. And the last pick I want to talk about in the fourth round, Tylan Wallace, also from Oklahoma State. He was their number one receiver. The Ravens took him at 131. And I mean, he's no Tyler Johnson, who the Bucs got in the fifth last year. I think Tyler Johnson's a better prospect, but Tylan Wallace is still a very good player. And definitely a top 10 receiver. I think, well, maybe not definitely, but potentially a top 10 receiver in this draft class. And he was the 19th receiver taken. So that there is value with a capital V, my friends. Okay. I like this pace. This is a good pace. Fifth round pick, my favorite pick of the fifth round, hands down, one of my favorite picks in the draft. Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles. A little bit of redemption for them. That I know a lot of Philly fans have been disappointed in how he's drafted and some of the personnel decisions he's made over the last few years since their Super Bowl glory years. He took Kenneth Gainwell, running back out of Memphis, and this kid is good. He is legit. He could have went way earlier. I was really surprised to see him sitting around. That's another guy I would have liked the Bucs to get their hands on around this point of the draft. It's just late to get a player of that talent. Incredibly quick feet. He's like a tap dancer out there. Amazing hands, great receiver. He was originally recruited as a receiver, actually, at Memphis, and he just had one insane season. Before that, he was sharing the backfield with Antonio Gibson. So I think maybe that's why he was sliding under the radar at that point. Memphis is really a bit of a running back factory, low key. And my boy D'Angelo Williams at one time was a Memphis Tiger. But yeah, so Gainwell, he projects really well to the NFL, in my opinion. His skill set is really well suited, similar to like I talked about Michael Carter for the Jets. Just as a running back, you got to be able to catch the football. That is something that is essential. It's a huge asset for an offense to have if they don't have to bring in a specialist on third down to all of a sudden introduce the threat of receptions coming out of the backfield. It's like having another receiver. And if a team like the Bucs at times when you've got Ronald Jones especially in there, there's just not much of a threat to throw him the ball. And Leftwich and the Bucs offense kept trying to do that because we all want Ronald Jones to catch the damn football because he's so electric in space, so fast if he can get that damn ball in his hands, but he's got bricks under his gloves. So not these guys, not these new age running backs. They all know they got to catch the ball if they want to be valued. And Kenneth Gainwell was not valued enough coming out of Memphis. Good job for the Eagles. And some of my Eagles friends, I've been talking to them about Kenneth Gainwell, and I told them they should be excited. And with the 158th pick, we're staying in the fifth round still. The Panthers took Davion Nixon, who's a defensive tackle out of Iowa. Sure, this was a bad draft for defensive linemen. I've said that many times. I didn't have one defensive tackle going in the first round of the draft. And sure enough, that happened. None went. And it's been that hasn't happened in 30 years. So that just speaks to the poor quality of the defensive tackle class. But that doesn't mean that Davion Nixon isn't a better player than a 5th round pick almost in any other draft. So great job by the Panthers identifying that and pulling the trigger, adding to their D-line. And unfortunately, staying in the NFC South, the last player of the 3 that I'm talking about in the 5th, Avery Williams. Avery, that's my daughter's name. Hi, Avery. He cornerback out of Boise, 183rd pick to the Falcons, solid corner, and a really good returner. So it's always nice if you got a guy who has a potential to play corner and not just is strictly a returner. And this guy can do both. He's someone a lot of Tampa people had their eyes on around this point of the draft. 6th round, Trey Smith, who's an offensive guard out of the University of Tennessee, real big boy. The Chiefs, goddamn frickin' Chiefs. Continuing to find guys who are going to help them on that offensive line. This is a much improved unit from last year. They've really done a good job of changing the makeup of that group. And with the 226th overall pick, getting Trey Smith is crazy value. John Ledyard with the Pewter Report, he had identified Trey Smith as a potential 2nd round target for the Buccaneers. We're talking 6th round. We're talking like 160 picks later than that. So that's crazy. He slipped. Apparently there were some like internal organ concerns. So obviously that's significant. Hope he's okay. I hope it's nothing too serious, but obviously eventually the cookie crumbled and the Chiefs were like, fuck this, we're taking this kid. And I don't blame him. That's like the type of risky pick I would have loved the Bucs to make. You know, you can take a chance. You can take a swing. You're in a rare position where you can. Yeah. Okay. A player I really like who also went in the 6th round out of UCLA. He's listed as he's like a running back / wide receiver. Like he's listed as a running back, but he's almost more of a receiver, I believe. But no, like I know he's more of a receiver than a running back in my opinion, but I'm saying I believe he was listed at running back. 211th, the Browns got him. Good job by these Brownies. He's like a Randall Cobb type guy, like just this hybrid scat back, and also a great returner. So that's really phenomenal value in the 6th round, in the 200s for the Browns, who just had a rock solid draft. God damn. And one player no one else in the world seems to have any eyes on, positive eyes on other than me, but Sam Ehlinger, quarterback out of Texas. Colts got him at with the 218th pick. I like him. I think he's got enough talent that he's worth taking a flyer at this point of the draft. And Frank Reich, you know, he's former Buffalo Bills backup quarterback, and he's known to get the most out of his quarterbacks. I don't think even he can do it with Carson Wentz this year. But Sam Ehlinger, some nice value. They've acquired a couple decent, pretty good young backup quarterbacks there for him to work with if Wentz does do what I expect and suck. 7th round, one guy I want to talk about who was drafted in the 7th round, and that is Presley Harvin III, the punter out of Georgia, the 260-pound punter out of Georgia. He's got a cannon for an arm and a boot for a leg. He can throw the ball like 60 yards in the air, and they like to use him for fake punts and passes over at Georgia Tech. So yeah, he's a cool player. He's hilarious. Google or YouTube him. I sent it to my buddies. They were loving it. He's a legend already. So yeah, Presley Harvin, keep an eye on him for the Steelers. It'll be worth watching them turn the ball over on downs or when they punt it up, just to see that boy go. Okay, so that was my kind of rapid fire through all the players round by round that I really liked and thought were great value selections for their respective teams. It is now time for me to look at how the teams did, and I've looked at every team's draft. I obviously watched every second of the draft. And I feel pretty good about this list here. Very unbiased, very objective, and you'll be able to tell because I think an NFC South team is in it. So, okay, so I'm going to start with what I'm calling the final 4 of the 10 best drafts. And these are the 4 best drafts in my opinion. And they're not in a particular order, these 4 drafts. It's just these are the 4 that are the 4 best. The New York Jets. Yep, the New York Jets. General manager Joe Douglas and new head coach Robert Saleh. I think they should be really happy, especially with their first 4 selections. And I mean, you don't have to it's hard to give reactions on guys you don't even know at all or barely at all. So I can't. But the first 4 picks I'm super enthused about for them. Each of these picks they're all offensive guys, and they're all going to dramatically improve this team if they play how I would expect them to. Zach Wilson in the first round, Elijah Vera Tucker in the first round, Elijah Moore in the second round. He's the speedy stud receiver out of Ole Miss. He's electric. So that's huge to get him in the second round. I mean, offensive line, they got their new quarterback, their new offensive line, interior offensive line, which is a glaring need. And then they get a stud receiver. Like, that's 3 important positions on the offense, obviously. And then they got Michael Carter, the running back I already mentioned, as one of my favorite picks in the draft in the 4th round. So, of course, they had 2 firsts, a second, and a 4th. That's what they used to acquire these 4 players. So additional draft capital always helps, obviously. But if, that doesn't mean shit if you don't use those picks wisely. And they did. So good on them. Good on Joe Douglas. The Jets have put themselves in a much better position coming out of the draft than they were going into it. Now, for each of these teams as well, I've just I just want to ask like a question. The biggest question they're facing moving forward with the Jets, it's, will the burden be too big for these rookies to all meet expectations? And what I mean by that is, like, who is their starting running back? I talked about Michael Carter being such a great complementary back at North Carolina, receiving skills, but I don't know if he's a bell cow right away. So is it going to be a tandem of him and Frank Gore? And similar to Elijah Moore, the receiver. I love Elijah Moore. He's not a big guy. He's not so is it like him and Rashad Perryman? Like, who's the number 1 to take the heat off these guys, right? That's a tough position to go into as a rookie. And of course, Zach Wilson's going to have the weight of the world in New York on his shoulders to perform as well. So, there's some concerns. Can those guys handle it? Can they hold up, or can the New York Jets fans be a little bit patient with these guys? But they need to bring in some veterans to help. I don't know what their cap situation is or what they're going to do in terms of free agency or what their plans are, but they're going to need to bring someone else to take the heat off those young fellas, because it's tough to come into the National Football League and be expected to carry the load right away at all those important skill positions. All right, so the second of my final 4 teams, in addition to the New York Jets, who had the best draft in the NFL, the Cleveland Browns. Their GM, Andrew Berry, has done a great job. I think this is his first draft or second draft with the Browns. I've talked a lot about the talent that has been assembled in Cleveland over the last few years. So you got to give some respect to John Dorsey, who was previously their general manager. And I thought his tenure was a little short-lived. Anyway, him and Scott McCloughan was involved in that as well. He was like that crazy stories on Scott McCloughan, who's like a guru of talent evaluation, but he's, he gets into the bottle and has some issues. So he's no longer there either. So anyway, Andrew Berry doing everything he can as a new GM, and head coach Ed Stefanski's got to be pleased. Cleveland Browns, round 1. I already talked about Greg Newsome, the second cornerback out of Northwestern. Love him. Round 2, 52nd overall, linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You guys are probably sick of hearing me say his name. I've said it so much. Love him. Round 3, 91st overall, wide receiver out of Auburn, Anthony Schwartz. He is a burner. He's fast AF. So that's a nice piece to add. You already got Odell and Jarvis and these good receiving options. Throw in a burner out there, stretch the field even more so Odell can work underneath on ins and outs and slants and digs and all that good shit. And the same for his buddy there, his old LSU buddy, Jarvis Landry. Pretty much forgot his name. And then their 6th round pick I talked about is one of my favorite picks in the draft, at least in the 6th round anyway, at 211th, UCLA running back / wide receiver Demetric Felton. Nice gadget player. return specialist. He'll be a nice addition too. So just continuing to stockpile and add logs to the fire. We'll see how she burns. My big question for them: can Baker Mayfield take the next step? That's what it's all comes down to there. I love Stefanski running their offense. They just seem like this franchise has turned a corner. They seem to be well organized. They have all these pieces, but is Baker the real deal or not? And he's got to prove it this year. He did fine last year. He exceeded my expectations after the previous season, and that's great. But that's not good enough. He's a number 1 overall selection. He's got to take another step forward. I like Baker. I want him to do well. But I'm just not yet sold that he's shown the consistency or the poise and leadership to do it. He's a little erratic for my liking. Streakiness can be fun to watch from the outside, but I'm sure it's not for Browns fans. All right, so the Jets and the Browns, 2 of the best 4 drafts in my humble opinion. The other team, I said I mentioned it was going to have some trouble. I'd have to mention an NFC South team, and I'm doing it now. The Carolina Panthers. Scott Fitterer, their general manager, who was previously the Seahawks VP of Football Ops. Lots of good experience there. Going into his second year out of Baylor as the former head coach at Baylor, who really rebuilt that program. Matt Rule. I really like Matt Rule. He just seems cool. Like I like him. I like his philosophy. I like how he articulates his philosophy. I like the hiring. Like he hired Greg Brady at LSU, a really young offensive coordinator who led that 2019 Tigers to the national title with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, all that fun group. But he put those guys in a position to succeed, and I think he's also been overachieving as a play caller already in his young career in the NFL. He's getting the most out of Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore and those guys and Bridgewater when he's got to play, or when they lost McCaffrey. They're still finding ways. Like I know they're not winning a ton of games, but look out, because they got J.C. Horn in the first, Terrace Marshall Jr. in the second, receiver out of LSU. Obviously, there's a connection there between Greg Brady, the offensive coordinator. But to get him at almost 60th, Terrace Marshall Jr., a lot of people had eyes on him going in the first round, potentially like towards the end, maybe to the Ravens. Instead, the Ravens opted for Rashad Bateman, but Terrace Marshall is legit. That's a huge addition. Brady Christensen, offensive tackle out of BYU. He was keeping Zach Wilson's backside safe at 70th overall in the third. That is a nice pick. Good, strong offensive tackle. Not many holes in his game, from my understanding. They got my boy Chuba Hubbard out of Edmonton, Alberta. Holler at your boy, Bodan Yard. That's wicked. That's great value. I already talked about it. And the same goes for Davion Nixon. He was one of the other picks I thought was phenomenal value in the 5th round at 158. So holy shit. And then Shi Smith, wide receiver out of South Carolina in the 6th. We're in the 200s there, but I think he has a chance to stick around potentially. We'll see. It's a bit of a crowded receiving corps there now. But anyway, that's 6 players that I like from their draft. So a lot of these teams, I like them. They've made my final 4 or my top 10 best drafts, because even if it's just because they smashed 4 picks, right? Maybe they even smashed 3 picks, and they were just such good players at such key positions that I think they warranted it. The teams that making my top 10 best drafts can do it any which way they want. It doesn't matter. It could be star power with a couple guys, or it could be just a super solid top to bottom draft, identifying undervalued players at important positions like the Carolina Panthers have done. So, yeah, they're building something there. Their biggest question heading into next season, the 2021 NFL season, is Sam Darnold the answer? That's my question. I don't know the answer yet. I think Sam Darnold, I don't blame the Jets for moving on, because they had to. They had that second pick with this quarterback class. You can't not pull the trigger on one of those guys, so you got to move them. They got a 2nd round pick, I think, next year from the Panthers for him, so that's a fine deal. But I'm not hating on the Panthers for taking their shot on Sam Darnold either. I think you got to get him in a new situation. He's got a ton of talent still. He's young. Like he could pop there with these weapons. He's in a great situation now. And yeah, one more time, I got to say how much I love J.C. Horn. I'm not looking forward to having him line up, but I mean, good luck, man. Man up on Mike. Godwin and AB are going to eat you. So we'll see what happens. But J.C. Horn's a fun player. I'll be seeing him twice a year. You can count on it, JC. Okay, so far, Panthers, Cleveland Browns, New York Jets. 3 of my final 4, the 4 best drafts. The 4th and final best draft, in my opinion, the Denver Broncos. Their new general manager, George Payton. Looks like Patton, but I believe it's pronounced Payton. His first 4 picks were all fantastic. He stuck pat at 9. There was lots of speculation. They were pushing hard for Aaron Rodgers, but the Packers obviously weren't budging in that area. So they stayed pat. There was a lot of people thought that was like Trey Lance or a quarterback going there. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I predicted this to be either J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain, whichever was there, just because I I just think Vic Fangio's defensive philosophy is so predominant in his way of coaching, and he's obviously got an influence with the GM, and that defense is already looking real good with Von Miller coming back. I think I mentioned that earlier. So you throw Patrick Surtain in the mix. The talent of those top 2 corners, J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, is just too strong to pass up. The only other possible option I was considering, and I believe I had in my first 1.0 mock draft, was Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State. And he's awesome, but he's not like to have a top tier potential shutdown all pro cornerback. You got to take that. You got to take that in this passing league that the NFL is. And they got that in Patrick Surtain, at least as a prospect. So then second round pick, 35th overall, Javonte Williams. I mentioned Thor Nystrom. I've mentioned him a couple times because I respect his work so much. He had Javonte Williams as his number 1 running back, ahead of Najee Harris, ahead of Travis Etienne. He had Javonte Williams number 1. Again, he's the other side of that 2-headed monster they had in North Carolina. Speaking of North Carolina, that team is always just putting out great professional football players, but the team's never good. I don't get it. What the hell's going on there? But yeah, Javonte Williams, that's huge, man. He's going to come in there and be super effective right away. Then to help keep Javonte Williams with holes to run through, they got Quinn Miners, interior offensive lineman out of Wisconsin, Whitewater, small school, big body. So 98th overall pick. He's a really good player. He's rated much higher than that on most people's board. So I'm not sure how he was available that late into the 3rd round, almost at pick 100. Quinn Miners, that guy's good. And then Baron Browning, the linebacker at Ohio State. I already talked about him, about why I like him, about why he's great value in the 3rd round with the 105th pick. Highly rated linebacker. A lot of people had as a borderline, first is a stretch, but like a 2nd round player. They got him in the 3rd, in the hundreds. So biggest question for the Denver Broncos heading into this season is pretty obvious. Who is their quarterback? First of all, is it Drew Lock or is it Teddy Bridgewater? And secondly, can you still win in the NFL without a legit quarterback? Because they got quarterbacks, they don't have legit quarterbacks. I think of like Brad Johnson in Tampa. That's why this past Super Bowl was so much sexier as a Bucs fan. We had a quarterback who was fun to watch throw. I respect and the hell out of Brad Johnson. Thank you. You brought Tampa Bay their first Super Bowl victory. Took us out of the dungeon. But damn, he was boring. No swag at all. Just didn't look fun out there. It was like if John Stockton, Greg Ostertag, Karl Malone, that Utah Jazz team was all molded into a quarterback. Swagless. But he got the dub. Thank you for that, Brad. And like Trent Dilfer, the New York Giants in 2000. But for the Baltimore Ravens when they beat the New York Giants in 2000 in the Super Bowl. Trent Dilfer wasn't very good, but he wasn't bad. Back in those days, if you had an elite defense, game managers could get it done by not turning the ball over, by being smart, by working in tandem with the offensive coordinator in order to call a good game and execute an effective game plan. I don't know if that's going to work these days, man. These offenses are just so lethal. But the Broncos have put together an elite defense. Now I expect their defense to be towards the top against the run and the pass next season, especially with Vic Fangio heading that group up. But they need a quarterback. And if they somehow come away with Aaron Rodgers, which is obviously something they want to do, then I'm legitimately very concerned as a Buccaneers fan about having to deal with the Broncos at any point this season. Okay, so that's the 4. That's the best 4 drafts according to me, Collin Hallboom. here at Bucks Banter. Denver Broncos, Carolina Panthers, Cleveland Browns, and New York Jets. The 4 of them are just together. That's the final 4. So my honorable mentions, the other 6 that have make up the top 10 of the best drafts, also in no particular order. The Chicago Bears. Holy shit, we're almost at an hour in a solo pod. I'm really going here. The Chicago Bears. So make fun of the Bears all the time. I have until draft day when they made the move. They gave up next year's first rounder and fourth rounder to swap from 20 up to 11 in order to select Justin Fields. They had to do it. You have to take risks in order to acquire a potentially franchise-altering talent at the most important position in professional sports. They did that. So good for them. Good for them. If you're going to do it for Justin Fields. I love Tevin Jenkins, the offensive tackle at Oklahoma State. Talked about him a shit ton. And then the 6th rounder they got, I like too. Thomas Graham Jr. He's a cornerback out of Oregon. He graded out above 80 by Pro Football Focus both the last 2 years he played at college football, but he's an opt-out this past year, and I think that hurt his stock. I think a lot of guys who opted out, maybe because it's just old school coaches or just because they didn't have the tape, so they weren't as confident in selecting a guy they had no recent tape on. But that I've seen some of these guys slip who opted out, quite a few of them, and he's one of those guys. So anyway, that's 3 solid picks, but it's really with the Bears, it's just because they made that move for Justin Fields and they nabbed Tevin Jenkins in the 2nd round when they did. That's just such important pieces for them because they do have good players on the other side of the ball on defense, just missing that quarterback piece. So the question for the Chicago Bears moving forward, does Matt Nagy have enough time for Justin Fields to save his job, meaning Matt Nagy's job? He's got to be on the hot seat over there already. He drafted Trubisky, who Trubisky is not good, but still, I don't believe for an offensive coach, I don't believe he customized his offense to put Trubisky in a position to be successful. I think he was a little bit stubborn like that, So like even this past year, he's got Foles and Trubisky almost game to game to start the year. Who's the starter? Running the same offense. They're completely different players. So it's just some inconsistency there. So I hope he can put Justin Fields in a position to be successful and tailor the offense around his skills. Luckily for him, Justin Fields doesn't have many weaknesses as a quarterback. So he'll be able to be successful. Just don't fuck it up, Nagy. Or I'll come back for you like I have right before up until this draft. Another team had a great draft, New York Giants. Surprised to say that about Dave Gettleman. He's often the butt of all the draft day jokes, but he gets a nod of approval here from Mr. Hallboom. I already talked about. They're on the other side of the Bears deal. They were sitting at 11, wanted a receiver, or a defensive player, just because that's how Gettleman operates, or a lineman, I guess. But anyway, they were willing to move back to 20, and they pulled the trigger on a receiver with that pick, Kadarius Toney, one of my favorite receivers in the draft. And then they acquire a first-round pick, an additional first-round pick next year, and an additional fourth-round pick next year. That's how you can help your team right away and create a sustainable model for adding future talent to a young team, a young core. So that's huge. And then in the 2nd round, they got my guy Azeez Ojulari, who I wanted the Bucks to take at 32, defensive end out of Georgia. So 2 of my favorite players in the draft at their respective positions go to the New York Giants. I don't give a shit what else you did. Good job there. Question there is, can their new offense match their much improved defense? So a lot of people are really high on the players that the Giants have assembled over the last couple of years. Coming into this year, they're expected to have a really solid defensive unit. I think they graded out strongly this past year in some advanced metrics. So the forecasting there is for a strong defense. They definitely got the pieces on the offense. My boy Saquon Barkley's coming back. And then, they're throwing in, or they just acquired Kenny Golladay, pair him with Kadarius Toney. That's just lovely, lovely little pairing. But Daniel Jones is also, we'll see, buddy. We'll see what you got. Another team in the top 10 best drafts, Los Angeles Chargers, Rashawn Slater at 13, didn't have to go up to get a top 2 tackle in this draft, an absolute all-pro caliber left tackle for years to come, Rashawn Slater. That is so huge, especially because they have such a promising quarterback in Justin Herbert. You got to keep him safe. Fuck, I love Justin Herbert. He's so good, eh? Isn't he? Yeah. It's weird doing a pod on your own. You got no one to talk to, right? And then in the second round, Asante Samuel Jr. at 47, talked about that plenty. And they got Josh Palmer, the Canadian receiver from the Tennessee Volunteers. Shout out to Evan Winter of Bucks Report. He's based out of Tennessee, and we've been DMing, talking a little bit, and I retweeted him because he had some good intel on Josh Palmer. He believes Josh Palmer is legit, and from what I've seen, he does look that way. Excuse me. The Chargers' biggest question coming into this year, I think, was coaching the issue? Was it Anthony Lynn? Because this team has some nice pieces on offense. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, throw in Josh Palmer. That's another good receiver. And they've got really nice pieces on defense. Hopefully Derwin James can stay healthy, man, because that guy's talent's insane. They got some other pieces to play along with him on that defensive unit. So I could totally see. I'm curious to see what their over-under is, the Chargers this year, because I could see them turning some heads this season. And we'll see if the new coaching staff gets all the credit, as maybe they should, after how Anthony Lynn lost them so many games with his horrible decision-making down the stretch. All right. The Miami Dolphins deserve also credit as a top 10 best draft in 2021. Relatively new GM Chris Greer and head coach Brian Flores. I like how they're working together. They seem to be really in unison in terms of how they think. And you can tell when coaches and general managers are on the same page. It's just obvious. And there's not that like internal debate and conflict in terms of like valuing position. Do you go best available? We need to address this position. They're just step for step. So from my vantage point anyway, round one, they get Jalen Waddle, undisputed stud. And then they go and get Jalen Phillips. I think they had the 17th pick was their second pick. I should have wrote it down. So that's two studs, edge rusher and an elite receiving prospect. And then in the second round, they took the first safety that was taken in the draft, another Canadian, Javon Holland out of Oregon. He's another opt-out, but obviously didn't hurt his stock. He's a ball hawk, total ball hawk. His dad played in the CFL for like a bunch of years. He had 4 picks. I messed that up. Can't drop that stat because I don't have it written down properly, and I refuse to give you uncredible information. I prefer to give you incredible information. And then in round 3, they took a tight end, Hunter Long, out of Boston College. A lot of people like him. Okay. They deserve to be in the top 10, honorable mention, mainly because of the top end of their draft. Oh, shit. And, second round, Liam Eichenberg, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame, stud O-lineman. That's huge. Got to protect Tua. And he's going to help do that. Notre Dame, football factory of offensive linemen. Like how I was saying, Memphis makes all these good running backs. And then the biggest question for Miami coming into this year, they've really got a wicked defense put together. Now they're getting some offensive pieces in there. Is Tua the guy? Is he the guy? Tua obviously coming off that horrible hip injury and like shit just didn't seem right. It wasn't a smooth transition into the NFL. This will be the year that we see. He looked incredible in college, like a no-doubt prospect. A lot of people had him even being better than Burrow. I'm a Burrow guy. Always since his 2019 season, I've been a Burrow guy. But we'll see what Tua can do because the excuses are going to run out real quick when he's got all this talent around him. And then the next team deserving of honorable mention, the Jacksonville Jaguars, general manager Trent Baalke and new head coach Urban Meyer, I think did a pretty solid job in this top-heavy draft. They had these picks, and they took advantage of them early on. Of course, when you get a transcendent quarterback talent like Trevor Lawrence, how do I not mention you? I don't care how you got there. You got the damn pick. And then tons of people are critical of the Travis Etienne selection. Travis Etienne's my favorite running back in the draft. I think there's something real special there. You've heard me say it. But anyway, in round 3, they took Tyson Campbell, a cornerback out of Georgia, with their third pick anyway. And he is awesome. Tyson Campbell's really good, and he could be even better in the NFL than he was in college, playing opposite Eric Stokes there at Georgia with that elite defense they have. And then in round 4, they got Walker Little, an offensive tackle out of Stanford. who's a really solid tackle, better than a round 4 caliber player. So nice job by the Jags. They've added a running back, a quarterback, a cornerback, and an offensive tackle. Those are 4 crucial positions and 4 really good players who can come in and help out right away. Biggest question for them, I think, now is not are they going to win? And obviously Trevor Lawrence is a big question. What's he going to look like? But are they going to give Etienne the workload to justify the investment of a first-round pick? Right? Are they going to what are they going to create some new role for him as more of a receiver? Because they already have what's his name? Robinson. Look it up. Sorry, Michael Robinson. What is it? I'm starting James Robinson. Shit, it's embarrassing. James Robinson and Etienne, I think, could be a nice duo, but you got to keep if you're taking a running back in the first round, you got to get him touches. And Travis Etienne is a guy you need to get touches if you want your offense to be reflective of your most electrifying playmakers, which Travis Etienne will immediately become on that offense. Okay. Last team I want to mention, the 10th, in no particular order, but the 10th one I'm covering here that had a great draft is the New England Patriots. They didn't have like a premium first round pick. They're pretty much dead in the middle almost. At 15, they had Mac Jones slide all the way down to him. Didn't have to move up to get a quarterback. I projected in my mock draft they would need to move up. I thought 7 with the Lions made sense since the Lions had so many holes. They could benefit from moving down and acquiring some more draft capital. They didn't do it. Should have known they weren't going to do it. They never do it ever, especially for quarterback. And then they get Mac Jones, who everyone thought the Niners were taking at 3. And goddamn, what a good situation for him. He just seems like the perfect type of quarterback who's like coachable and intelligent, and he's played for Nick Saban. Like that's the kind of shit that just gets Belichick off. So then he sticks with Bama in the second round with the 38th overall pick and gets Christian Barmore, potentially a first-round talent, probably the best defensive tackle in the draft. That's a nice duo between those two. Incredible first 2 picks without starting from a premier spot like in the top 5 or some shit. And then the only other pick that they had that really jumped out at me is out of Oklahoma, running back Ramondre Stevenson. He's good. He's good. Thor Nystrom's 5th rated running back. They got him with the 120th pick, add him to their stable of backs, and, more to deal with for the defense. So my question for the New England Patriots is who's going to start at quarterback? They got Cam. I mean, it's got to be Mac Jones, right? I mean, unless Bill pulls out some weird stubborn shit, I don't know how he's going to play it. No one knows with Bill. You never know what he's going to do. But you know what he's not going to do, and that's trade up for a fucking quarterback, Collin. Why did I mock that? I don't know. So yeah, has Bill's revenge tour already begun? Are they going to turn it around this quickly from last season? Because even though they were finding a way to come out with some victories, they didn't look great last year. They did not look good last year. It looked like a franchise going down big time. But they invested heavily in free agency, like big time. That's all everyone was talking about. Say big time one more time, Collin. I'm losing my mind here. So we'll see. We'll see if they can turn it around this quick. If Bill Belichick can do it, I think he's probably the greatest football coach of all time. And obviously, I wasn't around really for Vince Lombardi's prime, or Bill Walsh's, but I think he's the greatest coach of all time, and we'll see what he can do with Mac Jones and the rest of that roster that he's paid so much to bring together. Okay, there we go. Just over an hour. That is my full draft review. After having already focused specifically on round 1 with a podcast, and then on round 2 with a podcast, we did the live one. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That's my thoughts on the best players selected. That's my thoughts on the teams that helped themselves the most this draft. That is my thoughts on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selections this year. Thankfully, they're not dependent on a great draft. They're running back, such a dynamic, well-rounded team. I'm so jacked up. I just think they could have taken a couple more swings on some guys with really, really high potential. That's what I wanted, not like the Kyle Trask thing. But whatever, I will cheer for Kyle Trask. I hope he does well. and I hope I'm wrong. On that note, please make sure I've been working hard, putting out what I think is good written content on the NFL draft and just the NFL in general. Those articles will keep coming. Might take a little bit of a break here because I've worn myself down during this NFL draft, but it's been really fun. I love nothing more. And I want to thank you personally, whoever's listening or watching, for tuning in and supporting us here at Bucks Banter. Over and out.